I've been at zero 3 times in my life. The first time, I thought it was the end. I was humiliated, broke, and convinced I'd wasted years building something that collapsed. The second time, I was angry. How did I let this happen again? The third time? The third time I understood something that changed everything. Zero isn't failure. Zero is feedback. It's life saying the path you were on wasn't taking you where you needed to go, so I'm clearing the board so you can start fresh. And I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what is this teaching me? That shift from victim to student, that's where comebacks are born. And if you're at zero right now, if you feel like you've lost everything, I need you to hear this. You haven't lost everything. You've lost everything that wasn't working. And that's a gift. Look, you're at zero, financially, emotionally, professionally, and everyone's advice sounds impossible when you have nothing. But starting from zero isn't your obstacle. It's your advantage. This video reveals why people who rebuild from nothing often surpass where they were before. Not despite zero, but because of it. Most advice assumes you have resources. I'm showing you how to leverage the only resource that matters at zero, radical clarity about what you actually want. You'll learn why your comeback doesn't require going back to who you were, how to build momentum from stillness, and why zero is the most honest, powerful place to begin. This isn't about recovery, it's about reinvention. So, why is zero actually an advantage? And how do you start a comeback when you literally have nothing? Let me show you what most people miss. I want to tell you about two people who lost everything on the same day. Same circumstances, same level of devastation. But 5 years later, their lives were completely different. Not because one was smarter or luckier, but because they saw zero differently. Person A lost their job. Savings were depleted. Relationship ended. And their immediate response was panic, shame, desperate urgency to get back to normal as fast as possible. So they started frantically applying to jobs. Any jobs. Jobs similar to the one they just lost. Jobs they didn't even want. They just needed stability. They needed to feel like they were making progress, like they were fixing the disaster. And they accepted the first offer that came through. Not because it was right, not because it aligned with anything they actually wanted, but because it was familiar and it was immediate. And they rebuilt their social life the same way, reached back out to the same types of people, recreated the same dynamics, because familiar felt safe, even if familiar had been slowly killing them. 5 years later, person A is employed, stable on paper, but miserable. They're back to the exact same problems that led to the collapse in the first place. The job drains them. The relationships are shallow. The lifestyle is expensive but meaningless. They never asked the question, should I rebuild what I had? They just assumed rebuilding meant going backward to familiar. And now they're trapped in a life they didn't even want the first time. And they're wondering why the comeback doesn't feel like victory. Person B had the exact same loss: job, savings, relationship. But their response was different. First, they grieved. They took one full week to just feel the loss. No fixing, no frantically applying to jobs, just sitting with the pain and letting themselves feel it. And after that week, something shifted. They got curious. They started asking different questions. What was I building before that I actually didn't want? And the answers were uncomfortable. They realized they'd hated the job for years, but stayed because it looked impressive. The relationship was comfortable but not fulfilling. The lifestyle required them to make money they didn't enjoy making to buy things they didn't actually need. So person B saw zero differently. They said, I'm not starting over. I'm starting fresh with wisdom I didn't have before. This isn't a setback. It's a forced reset. And instead of rushing to rebuild, they paused. They got clear. What do I actually value? Not what should I value? What do I value based on how I feel when I'm living it? And the answers were simple but radical. Connection over achievement, meaning over money, freedom over security. And from that clarity, they made different choices. They took a lower-paying job that aligned with their values while building a side project that excited them. They chose relationships based on depth, not habit. They simplified their life to reduce financial pressure. And yes, it was uncomfortable. Yes, people judged them. Yes, they had moments of doubt. But 5 years later, person B had a completely different life, different career, deeper relationships, less money, but infinitely more freedom. They built a life they actually wanted to live, not a life that looked good, a life that felt good. And the comeback wasn't getting back to where they were. It was getting out of where they were and building towards something true. And here's the critical distinction. Person A saw zero as a temporary disaster to escape from as fast as possible. Person B saw zero as a forced pause to redirect. Person A asked, "How do I fix this?" Person B asked, "What does this reveal?" Person A rebuilt on the same faulty foundation. Person B rebuilt on truth and clarity. And that's why most comebacks fail. Not because people don't work hard, not because they lack resources, but because they're just reconstructions. You rebuild the same life that collapsed with the same values, the same patterns, the same blind spots. And then you wonder why you're unhappy even though you came back. Real comebacks require reinvention, not reconstruction. And zero gives you permission to ask the question most people never ask because they're too busy maintaining what they have. What do I actually want? But here's the part that nobody tells you. And it's the key to why some comebacks generate momentum while others stall immediately. It's about understanding the physics of how comebacks actually work. There's this false belief that to come back, you need to start big. You need funding to start the business. You need a gym membership to get healthy. You need a relationship to not be lonely. You need recognition to matter. And this belief paralyzes people at zero because they have none of those things. So they wait. They tell themselves, as soon as I have this, then I'll start. But the resources never come because they're not moving. They're frozen in the belief that they need something external to begin. But here's the truth. All momentum begins with stillness. Think about a seed. It doesn't rush out of the ground. It sits in darkness. It takes root. It builds a foundation you can't see. And only after that invisible work does it break the surface. Visible growth is always the result of invisible work. But we've been conditioned to only value the visible. So we skip the invisible and wonder why nothing grows. Let me tell you about someone at complete zero. No job, no money, no clear path forward. And everyone around them is saying just do something, anything, start moving. But they do something different. They get still. They spend 2 weeks in brutal honesty with themselves. What do I actually value? What patterns led to the collapse? What do I want to build that's sustainable this time? Who do I want to become, not who do I want to appear to be? And their friends think they're procrastinating. They think they're avoiding, but they're not. They're building the foundation. They're doing the invisible work. And after those 2 weeks of clarity, they make their first move. And it's tiny, almost embarrassingly small. They don't apply to 100 jobs. They don't launch a business before it's ready. They have one conversation with someone in a field they're interested in. That's it. One conversation. And it feels insignificant. It feels like nothing is happening. But something is happening. They're moving from clarity, not from desperation. And there's a massive difference. Week 1, they make one micro move per day. One conversation. 1 hour learning a skill. One morning of structured routine. And it feels like nothing is changing. Week 2, the consistency starts to build. The resistance starts to decrease. It's still hard, but it's less hard. Week 3, the micro moves feel natural instead of forced. Week 4, someone from one of those early conversations reaches out with an opportunity. Month 2, the skill they've been learning is noticeably improving. Month 3, an opportunity emerges from the consistency. Not because they got lucky, because they created conditions for luck to find them. Month 6, the momentum is undeniable. They're not at zero anymore, not even close. Year 1, their life is unrecognizable. Not because of one big move, because of daily micro moves compounding over time. And here's the physics lesson. Getting a boulder rolling is the hardest part. The initial push requires the most energy. But once it's moving, momentum assists. The boulder wants to keep rolling. But you can't skip the initial push. You can't expect momentum before movement. And at zero, the initial push looks like micro moves from clarity. But people quit. They quit because they don't see results fast enough. They don't understand that visible change is a lagging indicator of invisible work. They're making the moves, but they're not seeing the results yet, so they assume it's not working. But it is working. It's just working beneath the surface. Compare this to someone who frantically applies to 100 jobs with no clarity about what they actually want. Scattered energy, no direction, desperate. They're moving, sure, but they're moving without intention. And 6 months later, they're still scattered, still desperate, still at zero in a different way. Now compare that to the person who makes one thoughtful connection per day. Focused energy, clear direction, intentional. And after 6 months, they have momentum. Not because they worked harder, but because they built the foundation first, then moved with intention. So your comeback doesn't start with action. It starts with clarity that informs action. Zero forces clarity if you let it, if you sit with it instead of running from it. If you ask, what is this teaching me, instead of why is this happening to me? Most people avoid the stillness because it's uncomfortable, because sitting with the wreckage and asking hard questions hurts. But that stillness is where you decide what you're actually building, and that decision determines everything that follows. Now let me break down the truths you need to understand. First, zero isn't empty, it's unbuilt. You're not starting with nothing. You're starting with freedom from defending what wasn't working. The absence of resources forces clarity about what actually matters. And clarity is more valuable than resources because clarity tells you where to direct energy when you get resources. Second, a real comeback isn't returning to where you were. It's building toward where you want to be. Don't reconstruct the life that collapsed. Reinvent based on wisdom you didn't have before. You know more now. You've seen what doesn't work. Use that knowledge to build something different. Third, all momentum begins with stillness. Before you move, get clear. Clarity informs direction. Direction sustains momentum. Scattered action from zero just creates more chaos. Intentional micro moves from clarity create compounding progress. Fourth, the only resource you need at zero is clarity about your next right step, not your next 10 steps. Your next one. Then you do it. Then you find the next one. Resources appear when direction is clear and movement is consistent. But most people are waiting for resources before they'll move, and movement is what attracts resources. And fifth, comebacks don't happen overnight, but they don't take as long as you fear. Micro moves compound faster than you think. You just have to trust the process even when it feels slow, especially when it feels slow, because slow and intentional beats fast and scattered every single time. And here's the paradox. The less you have, the more freedom you have to build what actually matters. The more you try to go backward to familiar, the less likely your comeback succeeds. Forward into the unknown is scarier, but it's where transformation lives. Backward into comfortable failure is safer, but it's just recreating the problem. So you're not starting from zero. You're starting from wisdom, clarity, and the absence of illusions. That's the strongest foundation possible. Most people never get this foundation because they never lose everything. They keep maintaining what doesn't work because they never hit zero. You did, and that means you have something they don't. The opportunity to build from truth instead of from comfort. So how do you actually do this? How do you turn zero into the beginning of your strongest chapter? Let me give you the framework. First week, the stillness week. Don't start rebuilding yet. I know you want to. I know the urge is overwhelming. Resist it. Spend 1 week in honest inventory. What was I building before that I didn't actually want? What patterns led to the collapse? What do I value now that I understand more clearly? What would I build if I could start with complete freedom? Write the answers down. This becomes your blueprint. Week 2, values alignment check. From your inventory, identify your top 3 to 5 core values. Not what you think you should value, what you actually value when you're honest. Then ask, does my next move align with these? If it doesn't, it's the wrong move, even if it seems practical. At zero, you can't afford to waste energy on misalignment. You have limited energy. Spend it only on paths that align with your actual values. Week 3 onward, the micro move commitment. Identify one tiny action you can take today toward the life you're building. Make it so small it's almost embarrassing. One email, one conversation, 1 hour of learning, one application, and do it consistently, daily if possible, minimum 3 times per week, and track it physically. Mark an X on a calendar, put a check mark on a list. Visibility creates momentum. When you see the chain of consistency, you don't want to break it. Monthly, do a momentum check. First day of each month, review. Am I building what I actually want or what I think I should want? Are my micro moves compounding or am I scattered? What's one adjustment I can make to increase alignment? And make the adjustment immediately. Don't wait. If something's off, pivot. Zero gives you permission to pivot without massive loss because you don't have much to lose. And quarterly, every 3 months, do a future self-projection. Picture yourself 1 year from now. Ask, if I keep making these daily micro moves, where will I be? If the answer excites you, continue. If it doesn't, pivot. You're building the wrong thing. And at zero, you can pivot easily because you're not protecting a big structure yet. You're just beginning. That's the advantage. So here's what we've uncovered. Zero isn't the end. It's the beginning with clarity. Your comeback doesn't require resources. It requires knowing what you actually want to build. Don't reconstruct what collapsed. Reinvent based on what you've learned. Start with stillness. Get clear on values. Then make micro moves that compound. Momentum comes from consistency, not intensity. And the person who comes back from zero isn't the person who lost everything. It's someone wiser, clearer, stronger. That's not recovery. That's evolution. You're not at zero because you failed. You're at zero because the universe cleared space for you to build something real. Zero isn't empty. It's potential. It's the most honest place you've ever stood because there's nothing left to pretend about, nothing left to defend, nothing between you and the truth of what you actually want. And from that truth, you can build anything, not the life you had, the life you're meant to have. Your comeback doesn't start when you have resources. It starts when you have clarity, and you have that right now. If you're at zero, I know it feels like the end. Like you've lost everything and there's no way back. But you haven't lost everything. You've lost everything that wasn't taking you where you needed to go. And what remains? Your wisdom, your clarity, your ability to choose your next step. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything you need to start the most important chapter of your life. Not your comeback chapter, your breakthrough chapter, where you stop rebuilding who you were and start becoming who you're capable of being. If this shifted how you see zero, drop a comment and tell me, what's the one micro move you're committing to this week? What are you going to start building from your 0 point? And if you want more truth about transformation that meets you where you are and shows you what's possible, subscribe. Not because I need it, but because your comeback needs reminders that you're not broken, you're not behind, you're just at the beginning of something powerful. I'll see you in the next one. Now go take your first micro move.